with a rateable value less than £50,000. That will give on average £400 a year to a small company which benefits, and there are very many thousands who will benefit, including very many thousands, I would think, amongst your members across the country. Secondly, we're going to establish a British investment bank, which is going to be there to make sure that it can do better at lending to small companies who want to grow and expand. We're going to change the law on late payment, because there's more we can do to stop a late payment culture where large companies make life much harder for small companies in terms of payment terms and timetables. And fourthly, we're guaranteeing an apprenticeship for every school leaver leaving school at 18. I want more small companies to be taking on apprentices. I think it's tougher for small companies to do so because there's more risk for them, because obviously it's a larger part of their workforce. There's more we can do to ease the burdens, both financially and administratively, so that small companies get more help from government to take on apprentices. Across this city, the number of apprentices fell in the last year. That's not good enough, and we need to turn that round, and we can only do that by working with the Birmingham and West Midlands small business community, and that's true right across the country as well. Gentleman straight in front of you there. It's Michael, isn't it?
Yeah, Michael Savage from the Times. You've said that you want to retain the lowest rate of corporation tax in the G7. That gives you quite a lot of wiggle room, being that Canada's the next lowest, about just over 26%. Is there a case for raising corporation tax beyond the 21% you've already said you'll go back to, or would you like to see it capped at 21% for, say, the next Parliament?
We, when we came into government in 1997, inherited a corporation tax of 33%. We cut it to 28%. We've supported the cuts which have happened since. Where we are disagreeing with George Osborne is on the next cut happening now. We won't go from 21 down to 20. We'll keep it at 21 and use that money for small companies. As you know, that keeps us clearly as the lowest corporation tax rate country in the G7, and it's our commitment to keep there. As I said, we've supported the cuts to where we are today. What I want to see is a corporation tax system which is supports long-term investment, which, if we can, rebalances the playing field so that equity is not disadvantaged versus debt finance. These are all issues which we've been discussing with the CBI and other business organisations over the last few months. If we're going to make sure we strengthen our economy and create more good jobs, part of that is turning around what is in this Parliament being a really woeful performance in terms of business investment. I think there's other things which we need to do to improve the business investment performance, not least remove the huge uncertainty which the Conservatives have cast over our economy because of the uncertainty about whether they think we'll stay in the European Union in the next Parliament. But for us, keeping our corporation tax competitive in the next Parliament is very, very important. We've supported the cuts so far, but the next one we're not going to do. Who else? Anybody else? Gentleman here, and then I'll come over there.
Thank you. Joe Reeves, Corporate Affairs Director for Midland Heart Housing Association. We have 32,000 properties within the West Midlands. What I'd like to ask the Chancellor is, what is your commitment towards affordable housing investment over the next 5 years?
Right. We, in our manifesto, aren't making any promises paid for by additional borrowing, but we have said within the overall capital spending plans of the government, we want to tilt the balance overall more towards housing, because I think that if we're going to deliver the ambitious goal of 200,000 more homes a year, that requires government to do its bit. And we want to see more homes being built by the private sector, but also by housing associations, and also by council housing as well, right across that mix. So we would like to see more resource coming in from government within the overall capital spending totals. As you know, there isn't enough by itself to do the job. There's other things which we need to do to make the planning system work, to make sure the infrastructure is there, to actually be a bit bolder and more ambitious about opening up new opportunities for housing. I don't think it's good enough for Nick Clegg and David Cameron to make a speech 2 or 3 years ago promising new garden cities and ending up with a couple of thousand houses in Ebbsfleet. That's not a vision, it's a drop in the ocean. So we will put implementing Lions and turning round the housing crisis in our country at the centre, not just of our manifesto, but our budgets in the next Parliament. This is a social justice issue, but it's actually an economic imperative. These days, when I talk to companies, they're as worried as we all are about the housing shortage in our country and what that is doing to productivity as well as to the life chances of people who are finding it very hard to get on the housing ladder. Yep, there, and then I'll go behind.
Jack Doyle from the Mail.
Hello, Jack.
The IFS say that your spending plans could involve a deficit of up to 30 billion by the end of the Parliament. How can you reasonably describe that as balancing the books?
Well, what we're aiming to do is get the current budget, excluding investment, back into surplus by the end of the Parliament. That is exactly the same objective which David Cameron and George Osborne embarked upon at the beginning of this Parliament. They were also targeting the current budget. The difference is they failed in this Parliament, and we're going to succeed in the next Parliament. We're looking for a surplus rather than balance, which is why I don't agree with those IFS numbers. That's not the logical conclusion of anything that we've said. I think that George Osborne's plan at the moment to go a lot further than that is pretty reckless. He's saying not only cover all current spending with taxes, he wants to get the overall budget back into surplus, and he wants to do so by not the end of the Parliament, but by 2018. The consequence of that, as you know, the IFS have said, means that under the Tories, you will have much, much bigger public spending cuts. Not only much, much bigger public spending cuts than under Labour, but much bigger public spending cuts than George Osborne has delivered so far in this Parliament. Bigger in the next 3 years than in the last 5, doubling next year compared to this year. Now, there are very many Daily Mail readers who think we should fund our armed forces. There are very many Daily Mail readers who want police in the streets. There are very many Daily Mail readers who think social care is really important. There are very many Daily Mail readers who rely upon our National Health Service. The Osborne plan for an overall budget surplus by 2018 and deeper cuts in the next 3 years would be devastating for policing, for defence, for social care and for the National Health Service. George Osborne may be going to sign up to that, but I'm not going to, because it would be to let your readers and the people of Britain down, and that's why I'm not going to do it. Anybody else? Yeah, over there. And there was one gentleman there, and then we're probably done.
Carol Charlton.
Carol.
Carol.
Brilliant.
This is just a request, Ed. 3 weeks to the election, please can Labour Party MPs wear red ties? We don't want to give any advantages to the UKIP.
Well, you should...
That's quite serious, I really do mean it.
Right.
Yes.
Well, it's a... you should draw no conclusions from the colour of my tie about my political affiliation.
But on television the other day,
Yeah.
I was watching somebody who was being interviewed, and he got a purple tie, and I said, "Who is he, John?"
Right.
And he said, "He's Labour." But I didn't know his face. He was
Well,
Scottish.
I
didn't know his face.
I was doing an event just a couple of weeks ago with Jim Murphy and one other politician. I'm trying to remember who it was, and we all turned up and we were all wearing the same colour tie, and that's a bit of a problem. And so therefore we all carry more than one colour tie. And I looked earlier. I thought, spotty red, purple, and I thought, I would wear one to match your top, and it was obviously a mistake. So next time, I promise you, it'll be red. I promise. Gentleman there.
Right, Carol, I'm wearing a red shirt, but not a
Are
tie.
you?
So,
I mean, I'm wearing red things as well. It's just concealed.
I am a former medic, but I won't look now.
Let's just not go there. Okay.
Right. I'm Peter Mayer, I'm chair of Age UK Birmingham. The third sector, and thank you, Jess, for your positive remarks earlier on, has been suffering really badly in the last few years. Yeah. What do we look forward to in the next Parliament?
I think the third sector is, and the voluntary sector is really important for a number of reasons, which I don't think David Cameron ever really understood. He thought that you could say the third sector would be, could take over from what government does. So let's cut local government services and let's wait for volunteering and the third sector and the big society to take over. And actually that all sort of collapse, because as you know, the partnership between what government does nationally and locally and what the third sector do are really, really important. And if the government pulls out of the way, it actually undercuts the third sector and the voluntary sector rather than enhancing it. In my constituency, loads of parents voluntarily run football clubs for their kids on a Saturday, but it relies upon a caretaker to come on a Saturday and open the gates so the kids can play on the school field. And if there's no caretaker, then there's no kids' football. So that partnership is really, really important. The reason I think the voluntary sector is important is not, as David Cameron says, to take over from government, but because often the third sector is where the innovation happens and where the trust really lies. People are really close and knowing their communities. We in government established Sure Start children's centres, over 3,000 across the country, being cut by the Tories. We're going to try and stop that happening. But the forerunner to Sure Start was Home Start, which was actually founded in the 70s in the Midlands. And it was about parents supporting other parents, often vulnerable parents, because the people who understand what parents need are often other parents, are often great sources of advice. And what we tried to do was build into the Sure Start Children's Centre ethos that sense that it was a non-judgmental place, that when you went in, there'd be a trusted advice, and it wasn't like going in to see an official, you're going in to see other parents. So often when I go into Sure Start Children's Centres now, you'll find the outreach workers are people who are also parents who came into the children's centre, sometimes in a rather desperate state, a few years back. And so Sure Start learned from the third sector. It works in partnership with the third sector. It can never supplant the third sector, and we need you to keep innovating and doing things a new way and continuing to build and renew that trust locally, and we can only do it in partnership. And if the government walks away and leaves the third sector on its own, actually the third sector gets into trouble. So I think once Cameron's gone, let's rebuild the partnership between the third sector and government so we can make our communities stronger and fairer and safer for the future. Thank you very much indeed to everybody. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And just to those of you who are here and are not party politically affiliated, we really appreciate you coming along and for your questions. To the journalists, of course, we really appreciate you coming along and for your questions. And for all the people who are here who are Labour supporters, 3 weeks to go, keep knocking on doors, keep making the phone calls. And as I said, Jess Phillips is going to be a brilliant MP for Birmingham Yardley. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.